Hello everyone, welcome back to the Fetch Quest podcast, where we talk about video games and more. I am your host Guy, joined by my fellow co-host Brewer.
Hello.
And Connor.
Hey.
Connor, can you repeat that please? You alright?
Connor has died. Lol.
What?
Wait, what? Dude, it's the beginning of the recording. What do you mean he died?
He died of being too cringe for liking Deltarune and Spamton too much.
Okay, honestly, that's fair. Shit. Well, that's rough, I guess.
He did like Deltarune and he really loved Spamton, but he was so young.
Wait a minute! Wait, I have a Phoenix down! Holy shit, we can get him back!
Dang, use it. It's better than finding a new member.
I have been reborn. I am new and improved and better than my previous self.
It worked! Wait, quick, let's test it. Let's test out the new Connor.
Alright, Connor, I want you to be honest with me. Like, swear on whatever you believe in. Do you still love Spamton?
No.
It worked! He truly is the new and improved.
Oh my god, remade Connor. Connor 2.0. I love this update so much.
Oh my god, and just like how we remade Connor, we're gonna talk about remakes today and remasters. What's good about them? What's bad about them? Do we like remakes and remasters? What can they do? What can they do bad? All of that today. So boys, I think we should start by talking about what exactly a remake and a remaster is. It is important to note that there are differences between the two of these. A remaster is essentially taking the same game as before and just upscaling the graphics to make it look better for current hardware. Meanwhile, a remake takes a game and completely rebuilds it from the ground up.
I think a remaster could do a little more than that. Like, maybe they could add some quality of life changes that like don't change the game in any like massive ways, but they make it a more pleasant experience.
Yeah, of course.
That, or maybe, adjust the difficulty because maybe this one part was not balanced properly, or fix some glitches in the original.
Yeah, I'm just saying like a baseline definition. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
My question is, boys, what are your favorites? What's your favorite remake / remaster? Because I feel like as games get more popular, like there's just more and more remakes and remasters of older games that keep coming out for like a new audience to experience. So I gotta ask, like, what are some of our favorites?
In my opinion, one of my favorite remakes of all time would probably be the Link's Awakening remake. I really love its art style, and I have never played the original, so it was also just great to play the original game. But all the new stuff like the Dungeon Maker and, as said before, the like improved like graphics and stuff like that, it really felt like an actual like reimagining of the original instead of just like taking it and then just like upping like making it like modern. It actually felt like a proper remake.
I think too.
Yeah, that's a good remake.
Like with all the Game Boy game or Legend of Zelda Game Boy games, all of them ran into the issue like the Oracles and Awakening of just the controls. You only had so many buttons and whatnot on the Game Boy, so you had to go into your menu a lot, switch around the items, do one thing, and then switch back. And you would be doing that the entire game, and it'd just be really annoying. But that was with the limitations they had at the time of it being on a portable system that only had so many buttons. But with it being on a modern controller, now you have all the buttons you would ever need, so I didn't have to go into the menu nearly as much when playing it. It just made it a much nicer experience overall.
That is one good thing, a really good thing that can come from remakes is like revamping the controls for like a modern audience and making the experience just like more streamlined and better. I know another good example of this was the speaking of Zelda, the Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask remakes, which I know are a little bit divisive among Zelda fans, but one thing that is universally acclaimed for is that they were able to make the menus better because of the utilization of the two screens with the 3DS. So you would have your normal screen on the top where you would see Link move and do all your actions, but your menu would be on the bottom screen where you can go through your inventory and change whatever you needed.
Dude, I'm gonna be honest with you. If I had to play the original Water Temple without the updated like touchscreen to help, I may have just ended it all there. Because I mean, the Water Temple isn't the worst thing I've had to go through, but it wasn't exactly fun. But at the very least, the remake on the 3DS did make it a little easier. Like they put indicators to make it clear like which level you were at, so visually it wasn't nearly as disorienting. And then,
Yeah, of course.
as you mentioned before, like with the boots, that's the biggest thing you would always need to be swapping through between to like sync or float. I could literally just touch the screen and then I could go up and down. Whereas in the original, I had to keep equipping and unequipping them because they weren't just a regular item.
Yeah.
Yeah, I played the Ocarina of Time on the like Nintendo Switch online thing when the N64 games came out. Um, and I don't know if they ever made changes to those. I don't think so. I think they were just like straight up like just ports of
Yeah, I
the
think
old
they were
game.
straight up ports.
Yeah, and the water temple. Like when I went into, it, I was like, surely most people were like exaggerating, right? There's no way the water temple was that bad. It was that bad.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. The Water Temple is definitely not the best thing, but like it's system changes like that can warrant a remake for like a modern audience. Um and transitioning back to like our favorite remakes and whatnot, I think a game that utilizes this pretty well, and it's my personal favorite remake, is the Shadow of the Colossus remake for the PS4 specifically.
Dude, I love that
That
one so
game
much.
makes so many quality of life changes in terms of controls. Like for example, the jump button on the PS3 and PS2 version of Shadow of the Colossus was the triangle button if you're playing on PlayStation, which you have to because it's an exclusive. It was triangle on the PS2 and PS3, but on the PS4 and on the PS4 remake, it's assigned to X. That's one of few examples, but the idea is that the game had let you have so many different options for how you wanted to play, not only with controls but also with graphic settings. They had their own graphic settings in terms of keeping up frame rate for performance, or you could do more graphics so you could have more visually stunning landscapes. The game was able to make the game more beautiful than what it already was, while making it accessible for a modern audience.
Yeah. I love that game a lot, and I never played the original. But I imagine if I did, the one complaint I did have with the PS4 game is there were some points where it still felt like a bit clunky, like it was a PS2 game. I can imagine if I played the original, it would have been 10 times worse.
Oh yeah, for sure. The thing also to note is that like with that game in particular, which we'll save like a big discussion for this for maybe a potential Shadow of the Colossus episode, is that that game just was so ahead of its time that it should not have been running on the fucking PlayStation 3 or the 2, because the PlayStation 2, because of how technically demanding the Colossi were, it was locked to 15 frames per second, which is absurd.
Honestly, I
Rough
think if it was like
platformers,
built
like
up for like the PS3, I mean, there still would have been difficulties because the PS3 was just hard to develop games for at all because they're like whack ass infrastructure. I mean, that's why we hardly see any ports of PS3 games other than like cloud streaming options from Sony. I think the added power of the PS3 definitely would have done a lot to help the game. But luckily, we got that remake for the PS4 that fixed a lot of those issues. And the game also is just beautiful now. Like, it is gorgeous. Like, graphics are never the main point of a game, or the main reason you should be playing a game. But goddamn, if that game does not look pretty.
Oh, for sure. Brewer, what's your favorite remake slash remaster?
Uh, I'd say I may just do a remaster because we just did remakes. I really like the Xenoblade Definitive Edition remaster because for one thing, it's one of those that are like really weird because it scratches the line between remake and remaster. Because Xenoblade as well was a game that was very much held back by its technology at the time. I don't think to the same degree that Shadow of the Colossus was, but the Wii couldn't really fully handle the full vision that they had for Xenoblade. Like,
Yeah.
if you look at the models for the Wii, like, they kind of look flat faced and like they just have a texture slap onto them. So a lot of times their expressions they can just look a little goofy and whatnot. But then you move on to the definitive edition. Uh, well, I guess maybe just remaster. Again, it's one
It's
of those.
more so
weird...
a remaster, but yeah, I do get what you mean.
Yeah, well, that's why it's so hard to define that right now, because I think for a lot of people just see a remake as like, oh, maybe just improve the graphics and just make like, let's say a 2D one, 3D, or if it was on like the original PlayStation, make it give it modern, high quality models. But I think it would take a lot more to do that, like Resident Evil, like that one. It does do that part that I mentioned, like with Xenoblade, where it changed a lot of the models to make them improved. But the original Resident Evils, a lot of them were like top-down fixed camera angles, and they had to transition that to like full 3D camera, 360-degree motion. So there was a lot more that had to go into rethinking how that game is going to work. Because a remaster is just going to be like the game as it originally was gameplay-wise, like Xenoblade. For the most part, its gameplay is the same. Like, they changed some menus to make navigating easier and setting up your equipment, along with maybe some button prompts for the battling. But for the most part, it's still the same game. Like, if I played the Wii version, I could still understand it, even if things may be slightly different. But if you compare, like, Resident Evil 2, like, Guy, I know you played that one. The
I fucking love that game.
The original and then the PS4 version, it's like night and day. How much they changed.
It is, and that's an example of a game that like there's a different. I kind of want to. We'll discuss this more later with a particular series, but obviously the Resident Evil 2 and 3 games they are remakes that change everything. But one thing I do want to talk about is that not only do they remake the games, it's more of a reimagining of the experience. Like it's not more so they remake it from the ground up, but they like reimagine how people could or should experience this game and make it a completely different experience, which it's the same game. It has the same level design, it has the same combat, but the way that they approach that is completely different. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, definitely. 'Cause the original had like tank controls and whatnot, which if you put tank controls in any modern game, that game's probably just gonna fail. I'm gonna be real with you.
Yeah, it would fail.
Not saying you couldn't make it work in a specific setting, like maybe if you were a smaller indie game, but I don't see any AAA developer going to tank controls anytime soon.
I don't think they should, if I'm going to be honest. I don't think tank controls are like... Because with tank controls, it just like restricts movement, which obviously like I know there are games that are with tank controls that are successful and great. Like, look at the original Resident Evil 4. But even then, they knew that, like, the tank controls were pretty restrictive, and they got rid of the tank controls in Resident Evil 4 Remake. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because they made it work for Resident Evil 4. Like, I played the original, like, on the Wii, and that was fun. It made it work, but it was still frustrating at times. Like, I just wanted to go backwards when there's, like, a shit ton of enemies surrounding me. And I kind of, like, just had to either press back awkwardly, not know what's going to be behind me, or slowly turn and then go forward, because they made it work with the camera angle, but gameplay wise it still has the problems, tank controls just not being nearly as fluid as you would want from a 3D game.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I feel like the developers of Resident Evil 2 and 3, like they realized, and 4 with the tank controls, they realized, hey, this was an issue that could, cause a lot of, like, BS in the game, so we're going to change it. And this obviously buffs the player because you're given more movement and more options to deal with it. So stuff that they did, especially in Resident Evil 4, I noticed this a lot more, is that they made the enemies much more aggressive to like match the challenge. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good balance because if you remove the tank controls, they probably did build the enemies around that in the original, over like maybe walking slowly towards you so you can have time to turn around. But if they didn't change that, I think that would make the game too easy. So that was good on them. That was good.
Oh yeah, it was a very good change in my opinion. I do think that like I'm gonna be real. I do think the Resident Evil 2 version it's better than the original. Three. That's arguable because that's actually something we can talk about next. They actually take out content.
Ooh, yeah, I think it's a good pivot to where games that don't really have a definitive version play. Like
Yeah,
recently, Persona 3 Reload came out. We've been playing that. It's
Yeah.
pretty good. But that game, like one thing that people are a bit iffy on is some of the content that was in previous versions not being in like the remake. Because in a remake, what you would probably aim to do is make this the definitive way to play the game, so you don't have to be loading up some old ass console to play it. You can easily just pop it into your modern console and play it with no issues.
Yeah,
And you want all the content to be there. But in the case for Persona 3, it had a lot of different versions. Two of them having a epilogue story, and the other one having a completely different protagonist, the female protagonist, which aren't showing up in the remake. Which the remake's really good. I'm enjoying it so far, but it is still like it would have been nice if those things were added. So if I want to experience that content, I don't got to go and play the old version.
yeah.
and that's you first, Connor.
I was gonna say, I have played a decent amount of P3R right now, but I do agree that like, while I do think the game is a really good remake, I do think that it should have been a complete package, because the
Especially for
fact that
$70.
yeah, especially for that high of a price, because I think, in my opinion, one of the things that makes Persona 3 stand out a bit from like at least 4 and 5 is the fact that there is a female protagonist as
Oh yeah,
well.
for sure.
Like you have that option. And so the fact that in what is probably going to be seen as like the quote unquote definitive edition from now on, just due to all the stuff, and especially since it's like a much more modern version of Persona 3, the fact that it doesn't have that really key feature to it. And something that should be made clear is that the female like protagonist for Persona 3, it wasn't like Pokemon where it doesn't have like barely any impact. Like there were some like key parts that were only accessible to the female protagonist.
Yeah, you
Like
could
all the
there's
confidants
like
were
you could actually
changed for the most part.
what, brewer?
I was saying like about most of the confidants had to be changed for that because like the female was dating a lot of the male confidants, but they weren't dating
Yeah.
females. So a lot of those had to be rewritten to work in the first place.
Yeah, and not just that, but there's also like plot and story changes. Like I know there's a really big part of the plot that is different from the female protagonist compared to the male protagonist, and that's something that they just kind of completely took out.
Yeah, and it really sucks. Seeing as how another semi big, like, well, not semi, another big part of the Persona 3 story, that being like the answer, I believe it's called, seeing how that's already going to be DLC, I would not be surprised if someday down the line they release a huge DLC thing where you get to play as like the female character.
I really hate that
That
though
would,
because a remake
yeah,
shouldn't be having all this DLC. Like that's another complaint I
yeah,
have from like some modern remakes. Like
like
day one when the game came out, beyond confirmed DLC for like the answer and stuff, there was already costume DLCs and whatnot. I'm like, this should have just been in the game.
well, my thing with the costumes, seeing as how like they're references to the other games, I'm kind of fine with that being DLC because it's not like a main part of the game. It's just like a thing where it's like, oh, that's cool. Like you can dress up as Joker, but with with story stuff, that 100% should have just been in the game from the get go. The fact that you're gonna have to pay to get like what is seen as like a pretty important part of the story is really like just bad
It's
I
in my
still,
scummy.
I,
opinion.
I
It's
still,
scummy.
I
It is.
still hate the costume DLC though, and especially the music DLC. The music DLC is like even worse because that's literally just an MP3 file. But like,
That sucks.
but like,
I forgot they did that.
yeah, in Persona 4 Golden, like, I remember playing through it. There was costumes that were like references to some previous games, like SMT games and whatnot. I was just able to unlock those, but we've gotten so used to like a lot of companies' bullshit DLC practices that when we see it, it's like, oh, you know what? It's a cosmetic. It's fine. But I'm like, nah, fuck that. Just give me the damn content. You're charging me $70
Really,
for a remake. Give me the
I had
content.
I was
What's up,
gonna say
Connor?
I had no idea like before you could just unlock like reference costumes because as said before, like Persona 5 Royal was my first Persona game, and like in that game, like you had to get the DLC, I believe, to like dress up in the C's costumes
And
and
at the very
whatnot.
least, Persona 5, like, it has its definitive version now on like the modern consoles that comes with all the DLC.
Yeah,
So it isn't a big issue. But when it came out, and then when Persona 3 Reload came out, Atlus's DLC practices are just not the
yeah,
best, to put it lightly.
yeah. Like,
No, that's
yeah.
for sure.
And this is less about the game and more so just the business itself. But let's talk about like another complicated remake and remaster situation. The FF7 remakes. And
Ooh.
before you
Oof.
two, seeing as how I've never even touched them, I'm gonna go grab my popcorn real quick. So while you guys, specifically Guy, rants about why they are very complicated.
Dude, we're about to have an upcoming episode soon that will have content
Yeah,
about that, so we're gonna probably make it short, but
yeah. I'm gonna make this short, but
lordy.
Dang
essentially,
it! I fixed that popcorn.
Square Enix got greedy, and their executives essentially said, "Hey, let's completely rewrite Final Fantasy VII in the worst way possible," and they did. And that's Final Fantasy VII Remake. But to go in more in a little bit more depth, but very briefly, they essentially are trying. They are. This is what I meant more by reimagining, because they're changing the the experience to make it completely different. It's no longer turn-based. It's an action RPG where they go through the same beats as the original, but they're adding a lot of content to the game to make it like to flesh out some characters, which in like looking at it from, you know, a bystander's point of view, hey, that might seem pretty cool. Get more character growth. The problem is that they're expanding it to a point where it's becoming a slog to play. So like the Final Fantasy VII remake in quotation marks it covers nothing but the Midgar section of the original Final Fantasy VII, which if you've played that game, it's only 5 hours, but they
Yeah,
turn
like,
that 5 hour experience into a 30-hour slogfest.
dude, when you said it was the first 5 hours before I played Final Fantasy VII, I thought you were joking, but I played it, I'm like, this is literally just the first 5 hours. Like, I timed it.
Yeah, it's not. I'm not even joking about that. And the problem is that they're just adding a lot of useless stuff that hinders the pacing, and if it feels like filler. Not just that, but they're also completely changing the plot. So one thing with Final Fantasy VII in particular is that it's not gonna have, by the time the Final Fantasy VII remake games are over with, it's gonna have a completely different plot than the original Final Fantasy VII. So you need to take it with a grain of salt. If you enjoy the game, that's fine. I do think they're good games. I just don't think they are the definitive version of how you should experience the original classic.
Yeah, because the way it's set up right now is you have the original Final Fantasy VII, and then you have the garbage movie that me and Guy watched called Advent Children, which is just it's a sequel to the original Final Fantasy VII. And then after that, Remake is supposed to be this weird other universe thing that happens after both of those, where the Sephiroth from those universes is coming over to this universe,
Yeah, he time travels. He goes back in time, yeah.
which is very
It
dumb.
sounds like
In the original Final Fantasy VII, Sephiroth never shows up in the first Midgar section, you know, the first 5 hours of the game. But then when you play Remake, he shows up everywhere.
And that's actually the thing, is that like you won't understand a lot of the references or the stuff that they are discussing in the game unless you've played the original. And that I feel like that suffers because like a remake of a game shouldn't require you to play the original to understand everything, but Final Fantasy VII Remake requires you to do that.
Which I really hate because, like, as much as I love the original Final Fantasy VII, it's not a JRPG I would easily go and just recommend out to people because it is old. It does have its issues a lot of times just because of the age it was made in. And a little graphical overhaul would be nice on that one because that's when they were figuring things out on the PlayStation. With the later PlayStation games for Final Fantasy, like 8 and 9, they look a hell of a lot better. But with 7, they were still trying to figure things out. So it would have been nice if we just like had a modern version of Final Fantasy VII to play that didn't change like the two major aspects of the game, which is the gameplay, which the original was great, but they've just changed it because they know a lot of people don't like JRPGs nowadays. And then the story,
That and the story,
one
yeah.
one of the best parts of Final Fantasy VII. It's what people remember it for.
Yeah, but just to take it the conversation differently, because you'll hear us talk about Final Fantasy VII soon enough. One thing that Square Enix actually does a pretty good job with is like they actually do remaster their games, especially the Final Fantasy series, pretty often, and like actually like make it accessible to people to play, which I actually got to give them credit for because if you I will admit this is a little bit overpriced, but I think they are still on sale. The Final Fantasy 1 through 6 remasters the Pixel remasters are on sale right now, which y'all should play, which they're only like $10 on sale. I know some of them are $17, which is a little pushy, but you can still play it. You can play Final Fantasy VII Original, which they still sell. 8 has a remaster, 9 has a remaster, and now 10 and 10.2 also have remasters. And one thing I will give Square Enix credit is that, like, not only do the remasters, like, do a good job of, like, upping the graphics of the game, they also, like, add a good amount of content to the game to make it better. Like, I know one thing with Final Fantasy X is that they added, like, 6 more super bosses to, like, up the post-game content of the game, and it's arguably one of the hardest super bosses in the entire series, which I think is awesome.
Well, I think something added to like Final Fantasy VII, like that's more of a straight port. But even with that, they tried to add a couple more things to just like make it a bit simpler. Like if you're selling me this game, you need to make it better than what I could just find online. Because I could go online, put a bunch of different patches on it to maybe fix some of those issues in the game. And what they did for the re-release on Switch, because I'd prefer to just do that instead of having to figure out what emulator to use. They added some of those things that I would have added, like I can turn off random battles at times. Like if I'm just trying to explore an area and I'm already decently high level, I don't got to deal with that. They added a like, let's say invincible mode. So I guess if you're like just trying to grind, so you don't have to go through any of the grindy stuff at times, because there are like maybe for some of the super bosses, it takes forever to grind even with that on, because there's no like really set method to give you a lot of EXP.
Yeah.
That, and you can speed up sections of the game that were like really slow to walk through, which is the fast forward button, so you can just move around the map a lot quicker.
Which I think is awesome, considering that like I know one of the very few gripes I have with Final Fantasy VII is like it takes forever to grind out the limits for each character, but with that it actually makes it pretty easy to do, all things considered.
The only thing I don't like that they didn't add that could be fixed with the fan thing, though this one's a bit more debatable, is like fixing the translation, because those games were translated back when they kind of didn't really care nearly as much about the translation quality.
Yeah.
It's like one of the major characters, Aerith, in the original game, she's called Eris because like of a mistranslation. So like it would have been nice if that had been fixed.
Yeah, that would have been nice, but it is what it is. I mean, we're still living in Final Fantasy VII Remake era, so we're never gonna get that fucking true remake. But I kind of want to move away from Final Fantasy because we have an upcoming episode soon about that. But
Yeah.
Definitely. I think I want to mention one thing. You know, we were talking about like not having a definitive version.
Yeah.
There's one that like I thought was very interesting when it was re-released, and it's the No More Heroes games. because originally they were released for the Wii. Like they had motion controls built in mind, and they had a pretty nice art style all in all. Then when they were moved to the PS3, I'm pretty sure they use like the thumbstick controls, which that part some people would argue is better because you don't have to move your arms around for motion controls. But they put some weird new graphics in. Like technically, it may look a little better just because it's higher fidelity, but the original art style, majority of people prefer that. And they had a couple more bosses too, but people really didn't like them. There's extra optional content, so when they did re-release these games on Switch, the fan base was actually really happy that they re-released the Wii versions, because even though the PS3 version technically had more content, it wasn't exactly the best content, and they really didn't like the way it looked. Which, after playing it, I think I would be inclined to agree with them, because the PS3 version kind of looks fugly compared to the Wii version.
That's really unfortunate.
No, it's a good thing. They re-released the version that was better.
No, yeah, I know. Well, I mean, yeah, that's good, but I'm saying it's like when you're given more content, it's that doesn't always mean it's the better version. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you can add more content to a game like later on with the remake and whatnot, like those super bosses you mentioned. But the thing is, it can't just be half-assed just to like try to sell more copies. Because I feel like with the No More Heroes, some of those bosses were just kind of quickly added in just to try to sell more copies.
Oh yeah. That's actually a topic I kind of want to get into now. Is that like remakes can be pretty bad, all things considered, and or just not justified in terms of like you getting them based off like slightly more content. And one I kind of want to get into is this came out recently, The Last of Us 2 Remastered.
Ooh.
So for reference, I think The Last of Us Part 2 is one of the best looking games ever made. It has incredible graphic fidelity, it runs incredibly well. It's an incredible looking game, and it was made for PS4. The problem that I have, though, is that they decided to make a remaster of it for PS5. Okay, that's fine. Like that's not the bad thing. You could maybe like justify a remaster for the game if like if you upgrade it, which they did. If you have the original not Final Fantasy, if you have the original Last of Us 2, then you can actually upgrade it for $10. My problem though is that they are selling the game, like the remaster itself, for $70 when the original Last of Us 2 goes on sale, like is constantly at like 30 or 20 bucks.
And the thing is too, it's like can't you just get it on a PS5 anyway because of how the PS4
PS5
and
is
PS5
fully backwards compatible. It has full backwards compatibility with the PS4 library. Like, Last of Us Part 2 did not need, like, a remaster or whatnot. Like, they could have remastered Bloodborne. That's one people have been clamoring for forever, but no. Last of Us...
Please, can we get it?
No, it will never happen.
I know it won't. But going back into it, okay, $70. That's a big price. Maybe they add extra content. That might be worth it. The only thing they add is a 3-hour roguelike where it doesn't add a new story, it doesn't expand upon any of the characters, it's just purely an extra mode that maybe lasts you 3 or 4 hours.
Man, God of War added a roguelike mode that was like 5 hours, and that one was a free update.
Dude, I'm not gonna lie, I put 13 hours into that.
I just say 5 stories for like just the main story of that, but like you can obviously get more out of it. But
oh yeah, no, I got a lot on that.
Free. My favorite price, $3.99.
That's my main problem, is that like the thing is, the investment that you're getting just isn't that much, because like it's marketing itself with, better graphics, but the problem is that the game already looked so good already. So the upscaling that it does to PS5 just isn't that worth, in my opinion. And that's something they kind of did with the Last of Us Part 1 remake, which I will give it this, they did redo a lot of the combat to make it better. I'll give it that. But like people defending like the graphics are much better have not played the remaster on PS4 because that already looked fantastic.
Well, I swear, most of like the PS4 to like PS5 remasters, you can like put them side by side, and they literally just look like the same goddamn thing. Or I would have trouble telling which is the better one, even if I see some minor differences. Like, is this really all that much better, or are they just trying to sell me the same damn game again? Which, in a lot of cases, yes.
Yep.
Yeah, it'd be like that.
Like
That's
at least
you first.
I was gonna say, at least nowadays, there are a lot of like remakes and remasters that just feel a little pointless. Like, obviously, The Last of Us is a very big, like, part of that. Like, there are some games nowadays where it definitely feels like they're necessary. Well, not necessary, but just really appreciated. Like, I know we just talked about it, but like Persona 3 Reload, like that's a really good game to remake. But stuff like how Final Fantasy has split it up instead of it being like one huge thing that feels just entirely like money based. Like that's all they want is just to get more money out of you because you're gonna buy the two games and the third game and then blah blah blah.
Yeah, they're kind of preying on your nostalgia in a sense. Which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I do think that, like, the games that we're talking about, I do think they're good. Like, I have my issues with Last of Us 2, but I still think it's a good game, all things considered. It's just that, like, a lot of these developers are just, they're asking a lot from us in terms of, like, these remasters and remakes when they're not justified.
A lot of
Compare
them,
that to, like, Shadow of the Colossus, which I feel like needed a remake, considering that you had from like if you're from the perspective of a PS4 player, you don't have a PS3. There's no way to play Shadow of the Colossus because there's no backwards compatibility. Not just that, but there's a lot of quality of life features that could be used for a new game. So it came at the perfect time when the PS4 was at its height. So people like I bought it, loved it, and we are glad we did because we got to experience a game that we never experienced before, and it was only $40.
I think some of this is a question of like, it's not about like the game itself, whether it's good or not. Because in most of these cases, like, yeah, the game is good. That's why it's getting a remake because people love the original. It's more so a question of like, what exactly did you do to make it worth it? Like, I know the Switch had that problem for a while starting out where they were like remastering, and I put this in heavy quotation marks, but remastering these games and putting them on the Switch because I mean the Wii U sold like six. They sold like 6 Wii U's probably. So you know, and they had really good games. Port them over to Switch where there's a wider audience, and that's worked out really well, especially in cases like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which is one of the best-selling games of all time. Some of the games, like, it's just weird how they priced it. Like, you get Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, which, like, fantastic game, but originally $50 would go down with their like Nintendo Selects to $20 during the Wii U era. Then when they brung it over to Switch, they added an easy mode with Funky Kong in it, and then they slapped a $60 price tag on it.
That's
Yeah,
absurd.
it's sort of like sorry, you first.
I was gonna you go first because I'm about to open another can of worms.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna talk about like how that's a very similar situation to the Mario like Wii U game, where they similarly brought it over, just added an easy mode with like Toadette and Nabbit, except that one was worse because we got a horrific phase of the internet from that game because of the Super Crown.
Oh god, don't mention that.
Yeah, that's another discussion, but at the very least, you got the Luigi U like game with that, so I'd say that's at least a little more worth because it takes all the content and combines it. I think probably one of their better ones was like 3D World because you got the original game, which was already pretty good, but then they also gave you that full like Bowser's Fury post game and whatnot to play with, which it wasn't huge, but a lot of people did get the game just for that because it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it was like apparently like a lot of people have said it's like one of their best like additions in terms of like content, and it was not only was it like well designed content, but it was content that was new and it was stuff that they like experimented with, which I thought was pretty sick.
Okay, but
Like
now
that seems like it's justified to like get, you know what I mean?
now though, I want to open the can of worms.
Oh
Oh
And
god,
god.
which can of worms? Which one?
the Skyward Sword can of worms.
Ooh, that's an interesting topic. Me and Brewer actually have like we have similar thoughts. Like we love Skyward Sword, by the way. Skyward Sword is fucking amazing, but Brewer, I'll let you go on with this.
My thing is, like I said, it's fantastic. Like, I think it has some of the best dungeons in the series, and I love the game through and through, even though it had bits where like it was stretched out and whatnot. But beyond like the quality of the game itself, they added in a couple controls for like a modern control scheme, an amiibo, and then they slapped a $60 price tag on it, like the same price as a brand new game. Like when that released, I could go and get Smash Ultimate for the same price. I could go get Mario Odyssey. I could go get Breath of the Wild at that same price. But no, the Wii game that was being sold on the Wii U eShop for $20, $60. Very
I
much not worth, but I think they just did it because they knew people would buy it and they knew they could probably get away with it, which they very much did.
I mean, like to be fair though, like that remaster, it is technically a remaster, but it did a lot more than like what most remasters do. It if for those who don't know, Skyward Sword was the Zelda game that was on the Wii. It was the main gimmick of it was the use of the motion controls, and you had to use the motion controls in tandem with the sword and how you slashed it and waved it to solve puzzles and essentially just play the game. But the problem is that like the motion controls were kind of janky, and they weren't responsive all the time, which led to a lot of people disliking the game for that reason. Which the remaster on the Switch, the Skyward Sword HD, they fixed that actually.
I will
Not
say
only
first
did they
and
make
foremost, the Switch version, it is by far the best way to play the game. I do want to make that clear.
yeah. But the thing that they did, which I think justifies the price, is not the graphics improving, which they did, which is obviously awesome. But they did a few quality of life changes, with like the teleportation, some of the menuing, and oh, the biggest thing, they reworked the entire control scheme. So you didn't have to use motion controls at all. You could play the game with a pro controller, and it would work perfectly. How they did this is that you had to use yeah, obviously like you had to
Thumbstick.
use the different sword motions to complete the game. So how they did that is that they used the right stick to indicate your sword slashes and how you would swing them. And if you wanted to move the camera around, you just had to hold down the left trigger and then use the right stick from there. Boom.
I do,
But I do
like
understand
that.
where Brewer's coming from with it being an old game, but I just feel like it's worth because they changed so much about the control scheme to make it such a better experience. And it's an amazing game.
Well, I still feel like it's not worth it because, like I said before, when I was mentioning Final Fantasy VII, they added those little additions in there to kind of make it what I could like get on emulator already. With Skyward Sword on emulator, that's something fans had already figured out like long before Nintendo did. Like there are multiple patches to let you just use a regular controller in many different ways. And like Mario Galaxy 2, a game they haven't ported to Switch, people figured out ways to make the motion controls work for that because they're not as easy to just map to a single button as with the original Mario Galaxy.
Yeah.
Like they did do a good amount to like speed up the game because there were bits where like it'd be really slow. Like if you look at footage of the original versus like HD, they did do a lot to like just make it faster so it isn't such a slog to get through. But as for the controls, I don't think them like figuring out how to like map something to a thumbstick makes it worth $60 when the competition out there is adding so much more, or like brand new games or games that were only out for a couple years at a time. I could get it significantly cheaper, like God of War and a lot of other PlayStation games that are like a part of PlayStation Selects. those were like games that were out for a couple years. You could get them for $20 or on sale even for like 10. But you're telling me the Wii game that's been out for like 10 years, it's more expensive than the original. It doesn't come with a controller, unlike the original. And one of the features they added, like the fast travel, which I don't think is super important, but I do want to just include it because it is a little scummy, is locked behind the MSRP of $25 amiibo.
Okay, that's not fast travel in general. You can fast travel without it.
No, I mean just you can go to the You can go to the statue. Again, I don't want to get too much into that because it's very. I had the amiibo. I didn't even use it because I just didn't care to open it at the time, or I didn't think it was that important.
You don't even really need it. You don't really need it. There's a lot of fast travel spots around the map.
Yeah, because fast travel in the game, you just need to go to a little bird statue. What the amiibo does is you scan it, and it basically acts as the bird statue, so you don't have to run around and find one. But there's plenty of them in the game. It's really not that bad.
Yeah,
it's really not that bad. Yeah.
I would sort of just like to share my sort of thing on the Skyward Sword remake.
Yeah, go for it.
So, when Skyward Sword first came out, I was a little lad, little baby guy.
Little Connor baby boy.
Yeah, exactly. And I had no idea like the Zelda series even existed, because believe it or not, I didn't become super invested in stuff like this until I first played Smash Ultimate. Because when I got Smash Ultimate, that's sort of when all of the all my interest in like video games and like playing more in different games, that's when that stuff really sort of actually happened. And so when I never played the original Skyward Sword in all its janky glory. So as someone who never played it, I feel like the remake definitely was a sort of. I definitely think the remake was a good thing because it allowed for more modern. I meant remaster. Sorry.
No, you're good.
But I think it was a good thing because it allowed people who weren't able to play it, like me, and I am a pretty big Zelda fan after all this time. So being able to play it and it not be a janky mess. Well, not like a mess, but like not have it be janky and be able to fully enjoy it in how it should be. I think it was a great thing to remake, and I know there's a lot of like controversy around that when it first got announced and stuff. But I really enjoyed it, and I feel like it was definitely like a worthwhile thing to sort of like get.
No, yeah, I completely get that, and that's the main thing we kind of want to we support remakes for, is that, like Connor says, like, this is something he wasn't able to experience prior, and remakes give the perfect opportunity to experience these classics while also being able to fix some stuff that was wrong with the original, which is why we support people who make remakes good. Like, developers who put time and effort into remakes deserve the credit. And I think we're seeing this a lot with like the Resident Evil remakes. Those have been great so far, besides 3, but that's for a different discussion.
That or
but
some
that,
other remasters.
Shadow of the Colossus. So what?
That, or I was gonna say, like in Nintendo's case, I still am gonna say Skyward Sword is too expensive. Like, they should have put it at a different price
pretty
point.
Expensive. Yeah.
But they did at least do something good later on. Metroid Prime, that got a remaster that changed a lot about the game, and it was a $40 price point.
And I never got to experience that before, and I did, and it was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still gonna get on them for not putting out 2 and 3 because, like, just come on, put the full trilogy on there.
Yeah, but at least they put Metroid on there, at least. You know what I mean? Metroid Prime.
I know, but I still don't want to give them too much credit because, like, Nintendo needs to do a hell of a lot more when it comes to giving people access to their older games, but also shutting down all the ways people can legitimately do that. Maybe not legitimately, but the ways people work around to do that. Like, you're making a fan project of our game to remake it? I can't believe that. That's terrible. We gotta shut this down now.
Literally. But
no, this is how it goes. hey, we are making this game that's really old. We're gonna make it available to the fans because we are fans and we want to make sure this is something even more people can play and experience. Wait, you're making a game that's not made by us? You're like releasing one of our games that's not made by us? We gotta take it down. Then why don't you just release it yourself? No comment. That's literally how it always
I feel
goes.
like Nintendo, they just kind of want to dangle it over your head, so you just keep salivating and you want it more. And then when they eventually drop you like 2 pieces of the thing they're hanging up, you're like, oh my god, thank you, Nintendo. I can finally
Yeah,
play it.
it's a carrot over the stick. It's a carrot on a stick sort of situation. Where like they'll
I
keep
hate that
dangling
it's
it.
like that.
Yeah. That's sort of for like another episode, I think, but yeah. It's a little scummy.
Definitely.
Oh, it's very scummy. It's unfortunate because like there's so many good games out there that just we're not able to play because like there are developers out
Mother
there
3.
that literally, holy shit, that's a good example.
Mother 3 doesn't need like a remake. They just need to fucking port the thing already and translate it or use the translation which was done by a professional.
Real.
Oh my god, just please let us play it.
Yeah.
I don't
But,
care
like,
if the
if
game's
there's
a little controversial. Just let me play the fucking thing without having to get an emulator.
Literally. I guess one thing that to take away from this is that like we do support remakes and we want them to happen so that we and others can play them, but like we do think that you need to have remakes like be worth it and also just like just do enough to make it better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like the best remakes out there, along with just like maybe making the game ready to look at with the modern technology we have. They're also going to look into the control scheme to maybe fix that, fix some stuff that maybe didn't work out as well as they thought it would, and then fix certain parts of the game that just you play them now and they just don't work. Like this part was not balanced properly. This was a little too grindy. Maybe just fix that so it can just appeal to a more wide audience and also be enjoyable to the original audience.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But I think that's a good spot to wrap up, don't you guys think?
I think it's a great. I think that's a great thing. I think that's a good spot. Yeah.
Any
But with that
final
being said,
concluding
guys,
points?
I think we kind of did it. I mean, right then and there, without even without realizing. I think we kind of did. Connor, I think you're the one who like didn't really give one. Do you have one?
Favorite remake or remaster?
No. Like a concluding point. Concluding point.
Oh, okay. I think, like as I said, as someone who didn't get super into video games until like 2017, 2018, I think remakes are really good practice to have. It just sucks that a lot of modern remakes and stuff are either not the definitive edition or are like mashed into a bunch of different parts, or they are remakes of something that came out like 2 years ago that don't need to be like remade. And
Yeah.
like stuff like the Mario RPG remake or the Thousand Year Door remake that they're doing, like those are genuinely good things to remake because some people just don't have access to be able to either emulate that or to be able to um like get the old like console and get the game on that old console. So I think they're all for the better. It just sucks that they're being used for scummy sort of things nowadays.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's a good ending point. I think with that being said, guys, I think we're gonna wrap it up here for our episode on remakes and remasters. But with that being said, guys, if you like this kind of content, like and subscribe. Hit that subscribe button as like you want to hit those developers for overpricing those remasters.
And then maybe comment one of your favorite remasters and remakes, or a game that you hope gets a remaster or remake soon. Mother 3.
True. But with that being said, guys, that's been our episode on remakes and remasters. With that being said, thank you very much. See you later.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.